we're going to move on to the zoom. So the zoom is going to be a little bit of a rebuild because we're going to have to get motors further out to get them to the focus and to the zoom. The iris will probably be pretty close to the body like it is already. And then we're going to have our rods at the bottom. And so we're going to have a little bit of a reconfig to do, but we're going to try to do it in a way that's going to be fast to go from this mode to the zoom and back. So let's get started with that. I'm going to tear this down a little bit, so we'll pull the prime off and I'll put a cap on, and then we'll start building it for the zoom. Okay, so now we've got our handheld stuff off, our primes off. So what we're going to do is I don't know if we need a longer base plate. We'll find out. But if you have like a really long zoom, you'll need a longer dovetail plate because you need to get the weight further back because of all that front. It'll be very front heavy with the zoom. So we might need a longer dovetail. We'll see. All right, so these rods might be a little long, a little too long, but that's okay. It's not bad to have them too long, unless they're like really, really long, but this should be good. We'll try this out. So these are 19 mil rods. If you notice here, if you look here, the 19 and the 15. So they're much bigger and they can hold a lot of weight. The reason we're using 19 mil is that zoom is pretty heavy, and these 19 mil rods are a lot more sturdy than 15 mil rods. They're not going to bend nearly as much, if at all, compared to the 15 mil rods. They won't bow. All right, so we got that. Now, before I throw the zoom on, we want to get our lens support, and what I like to do is I like to just slide it close to the camera, so that way as I'm putting the lens on, I can slide it into place underneath the support. All right, so I've got the caps off. You could probably, if you want to, when you're first putting this lens on, you could leave the front cap. Oh, good thing I looked. So this lens, the zoom lens, is a PV lens. So let's go ahead, let's put it back. So this is something that we'll have to take into account when we're switching from prime to zooms, because our primes are PL, but our zoom is PV, or Panavision mount. So what we're gonna have to do is whenever we want to switch, we're gonna have to switch out these mounts. These adapters. All right, let's make sure it's good. All right, good, it's open. So now we can get our zoom. All right, so if we look here, this is where that lens support is gonna go. So this thing's pretty heavy, so I'm gonna move my motors out of the way. Line it up. Make sure I'm not hitting anything. All right, so it's on there, and then we're going to bring our support. Okay, so we've got our support. And we'll screw in the screw at the bottom, and then we're going to loosen this. Not all the way, but just loose enough so we can move the lens up and down. So an important thing that you want to do when you're putting on a big zoom like this is, the reason that this support is here is because obviously there's a lot of weight out front, and it can obviously mess up the mount and all that, but also it's going to distort the image going to the camera because the lens is not lined up exactly with the center of the mount. So what we're going to do is, with my thumb here, I'm going to lift up off the rod, and I'm going to lift until I can find, and easily, you want to be able to loosen and tighten this easily. So I'm finding that pressure where I can just easily, basically without a lot of pressure or force, loosen and tighten this mount. So that's pretty good right here. There's a little bit of stiffness. There we go. So right there, so I'm going to keep that pressure, make sure it's the same, and then now I'm going to tighten this down because there's a spring in this support that's pushing up. So if I just find where it needs to go and then I lock it, and it's also connected with the screw. So if I find out where needs to go, and then just hold it there and then tighten this lens support, now we can tighten and loosen this lens mount. And so now the lens is lined up perfectly. There's no pressure on the mount, and we're not going to get a distorted image. It's very important when you're putting on big, heavy zooms. So now we're going to have to, if we look at this, have to figure out where we're going to put our motors. So the focus is way out here. It's way out here. And then we have our zoom and our iris. So what we're going to have to do, oh look, actually, this is good to know. We actually have another gear for the focus right here. So it has two. It has one way out here, but it also has one here. So we actually don't really need to move this focus one very far. So we can just get away with, let's see, one thing though is that if you notice the teeth, the pitch of the gear on this iris is smaller than our primes. I'm going to try to get in there, see if you can. So this is what it is, looks like with the focus, which was the same on the Cooks, but now on this lens, it's smaller pitch. So what that means is we're going to have to they have, on the iris motors, you can put the smaller pitched gear on top of this one. And so what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to get that. It might already be in the case for the Preston. So we're going to have to get that and put that on in order to have iris control with this lens. So for the zoom, instead of going over top here, well, that means we'd have to add a different rod. And it's honestly, I don't know if we could get to it. It'd be a little tough. We probably could, but I don't want to move this rod. What I could do is just add the motor down here. So that way, when I'm doing the build, I can just put the rods, put the motor, put the lens support, and then put the lens, and then adjust from there. So we'll put our motor here. Okay, so what I've noticed is that if we look closely, the pitch from the zoom and the iris are actually different as well. So we have 3 pitch differences. So we have like the really tiny, kind of like an in-between, and then we have the bigger. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the one for the zoom here. One way to test it is just like put it on there. Oh, so this is the one for the iris. So here now we've got, it works. So it's, if we go, yeah, so that one works. So then we'll add this one to this motor. This will be our zoom motor. This is why you want a precision tool set in your kit, because there are small things like this. Now this is something that's going to add to our changeover time, so that we need to like factor this in. So this is, this takes time. But what we could do to get this time down is we can add a 4th motor and have it with this gear on it already, which I think is what I would do, and what I will do is I actually have a 4th motor already. So this just happened to be in the case. So usually you'll just get 3. So if you're in a situation like this, add a 4th motor, because now this will become the primes iris motor, and then this will become the zoom iris motor. So that way, when we're doing zoom, we just swap the motors out, and we don't have to worry about messing with these tiny screws and like losing them, dropping them, lining everything up. Like all that takes time, especially if you can't get it right away really quick. So that's what we're going to do. So we'll leave this gear on this motor, and this will be with this lens, and then when we go back to primes, we'll throw this one on. So now we can put our focus motor back on. How did we do this? Oh, this way. But because of the way this lens is, we are going to have to move over. We're going to have to figure out a different orientation for our, oh no, looks like we're going to have to find out something else for the iris too, because I can't get all the way over. I'm hitting this mount, and I can't put it all the way back here. I don't want it so far out. So we're going to have to figure out a different orientation for this. So I think we're going to have to move this to the other side, or we could maybe flip the motor. This is why we prep. We're figuring this stuff out now instead of doing it on set while everyone's staring at you waiting to get the motor on. Like, this is something you do not want to happen on set at all. I think we can do that. So let's switch this. So if we just switch this to the other side. So remember, once we get this motor figured out, it'll be fine because we're switching motors anyway when we go back to primes. So once we get this figured out, it's just a matter of swapping it. We just have to figure out our orientation. Let's go like this. Okay, so this should work. So let's just get the focus motor out of here again while we get this one figured out. So this will work. So it lines up with our iris. And again, don't put a lot of pressure on it. Then we'll tighten it down. Then we'll find our iris cable. Again, you want to mark these so you don't have to do what I'm doing right now. All right, so iris, and that'll calibrate. And then now we can figure out our focus orientation because it's going to have to go off the top. But we're hitting this. And I don't want to have to redo a bunch of stuff with this either. So I think what we're going to do is when we're going to the zoom, and we already have to add a motor down here for the zoom, I think we're just going to move this one from here, and we're going to go here. So let's pop, I'm going to pop the zoom off, and we'll put those motors. I'm going to bring the lens case over. It'll be a little bit easier. Now, so when we're taking this off, we can leave this part of our lens support here. We don't have to loosen this again. We just have to loosen the screw and then take it off because we want to keep that the same height because that's our good height for our support. So make sure you're supporting the front of the lens because there's a lot of weight is going to drop. Swing the motor out of the way. Okay, there we go. Take this off. We're going to put our focus motor. We're going to have to pop this 15 mil adapter out because this natively goes 19 mil. You know what? To make it easier on ourselves so we don't have to fight the iris, we're going to put it on this side with the zoom. So we've got our held bracket, which also has a adapter in it. So we'll pull that adapter out. We're just putting it on however right now. We'll get it situated in a minute. We're just going to get it out of the way. All right, put our lens support on. And then now we can throw our lens back on. Now we can start figuring out where our two motors are going to go. So you don't want it high up like this because then any kind of torque, it can pop off real easily. So I like to put it down low. Even like have it bump the rod a little bit if you want. So make sure that's good. We'll tighten this. All right, so that's good. And then now we can bring in our focus, hopefully. Yeah, looks like we're good. They're really close to each other, but all right, they're good though. We can get in there, we can tighten everything, so they're good. And then let's get, so we have an issue here with our focus motor cable. It's too short, so we can't reach here. So let's see if there's a longer cable. So it looks like they're all the same length. No, there's one that's a little bit longer. That might be enough. Let's try it out. And then to help with the run, instead of going to the front, I think I'm gonna, well, actually, you know what? I think that is the shortest run. You wanna try to find the run that has like the shortest distance. Okay, so this cable's perfect. It's like the perfect length. Although we have to flip it upside down. Oh no, it's not quite long enough. Let's see if we run it this way. That gets, so there, that gets us there. So there, we can do that. We just go around straight over here, and that got us there because we're traveling further distance going around the top handle. So that gets us there, and there's still slack on it. It's not too tight. And this is not going to be in the way of anything of the operator because they're going to be on, sitting on the head, on the dolly or on sticks. So this is not a big deal. All right, so now let's make sure our rod is tight because then oh yeah, this was loose, so our motors don't rotate. Make sure this one's tight too. Okay, so this tightens the rods here on the base plate, on the bridge plate. Okay, so now we just got to figure out our zoom motor. So let's see what our microforce situation is, and then we're going to set up the rock and roll handle. So we'll lose. Actually, we don't. Are we going to lose the whole handle? Let's take a look at our rock and roll. All right, so we have our rock and roll handle. We'll just pop this off the pan handle, and we'll put on the rock and roll. Let's put our microforce in. So this is what's going to control our zoom. So we'll put this in here, and this just pops in real easily, and then you just screw this in. So the reason why it's called rock and roll is because this rocking part here, and then this, if you loosen this, there, you can roll the microforce. Because when I operate like a zoom, and if I'm sitting here kind of like this, I like to have this at an angle. So I'm not like this or whatever. So my wrist naturally just kind of rest on it, and then you can do the zoom with your thumb. So we've figured out our motors and our microforce. So let's get our Y cable so we can power up our motor and our microforce, and so they can talk to each other. So what we have are Y cables. So these, it's called a Y cable because it's, exactly what it sounds like. It's a Y, it's a Y cable. It's got 1, 2, 3, and it's shaped in a Y. So one of the ends, the largest end, will go to the microforce, and it lines up just like it's just another LEMO connector. So we'll line up the red dot, and then I like to just kind of wrap this around the head and just put a little slack in it. And then one of these is a 3-pin LEMO, and we'll find another 3-pin slot on our accessory power here. We got one more here. And then lastly, we'll take one and we'll run it up over, or maybe we'll run it under. Maybe we'll go under to our zoom motor. It looks like this is loose. There we go. Okay, this one's a little stiff on this bracket here. I would switch that out. All right, so we've got our zoom motor on. Just pull that slack out. All right, so now we're powered up. We should have power here. Oh, you know what? The camera battery died. So let's pop this off. Let's throw our shark fin on. So this is a good time to have a shark fin. If you're gonna be on a zoom, you're gonna be on the dolly, or you're gonna be on sticks or whatever, you can definitely throw a shark fin on, because it's okay to have that extra weight, because someone's not hand holding it. So I always, whenever I'm on a zoom or living on a dolly, I just throw the shark fin on. Let's go ahead and get another battery. All right, so now we got power. Let's see, yeah, and now we have power to our microforce. So if we just check, now it's set to very slow. So on here you can roll this and get it all the speed all the way up, and now it's real fast. Now let's make sure it's in the right direction. So if we're pulling back on the thumb, it should go wide, right? But it went tight. So now we're, right? Did it go? Yeah, so now we're all the way tightest if we went back. And then when we go forward, we should be zooming in. But it's reversed. So all we have to do here is come to direction. There's a little direction switch, and then it just switches it. And then now we come back, and now we're wide, and we go forward, now we're tight. Now, when you're getting your Y cables, there's two different kinds of microforces. There's a digital and an analog, and they'll say it on them. So this one says, microforce digital. The other ones, the analog ones, will say analog on them. And so you have to make sure that you get the right Y cables for it. And whenever you get them, get two, because you never know when the cable might go bad, or it could get caught, or whatever, or bent or something. There just might be a bad connection. Again, backups. You always want backups of really crucial items, like a Y cable. Because if this goes down and it's the only one you have, you can no longer use the microforce and you won't be able to zoom. And that could be a big problem, especially if you're on a job where the whole idea is that you're zooming in the shot. And you can't do that as smoothly with your hand, or that might not be the look and feel of the show that they want. They might want it to be smooth and robotic with the Microforce, they don't want you, you can put and do your hand, and you can get a zoom stick and use your hand, but it's not going to be as smooth as with doing it with a Microforce. So make sure you always have backups.
Quick note about this next section on the matte box for the zoom. When shooting this, it was a bit of a shit show getting the right matte box for the zoom lens. And honestly, it happens quite often when you're at prep. Much of the time, you're just trying to make things work. Basically, that specific zoom lens does not completely cover the sensor of the Alexa Mini at 3.4K open gate or 3.2K resolution. It probably would if we went down to 2K or lower, but most of the time you're not going to be shooting that low of a resolution. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but the idea for this prep was that our resolution was going to be 3.4K or 3.2K. Even with the difficulty, I think it's good to see how you can have a wrench thrown into your prep and having to work through it. If I was doing this for a real job, I would have immediately called the DP and let them know the situation and see what they wanted to do. If they wanted to add an expander or if they just wanted to switch it out to a different zoom. If we went with the expander, it would cover the sensor and change the field of view of the lens, but it would allow us to use that lens with that specific look. It may have a look the DP really wants. Swapping it out for a different lens that natively covers would also fix the issue, but the DP would have to be okay with the new look of that new lens. When in doubt, just call your DP and figure out what they want to do. And on that note, let's get back to it.
So this is a Panavision swing away studio matte box. And it's a pretty good matte box. It's modular, so you can pull out all these stages, and then it also has a spot here, a 138 tray for 138 Pola and for your diopters. And so what we'll do is we're going to have to, let's see, I think we're going to have to pull out, yeah. So the good thing we have these long rods, so we're going to have to pull out these rods so we can get this matte box on here. So what I'm going to do, instead of just pulling the lens and everything, I'm just going to loosen up my lens support, loosen up my bridge plate, my rods on my bridge plate, and I'm just going to kind of rotate and pull them out. It's pretty easy. Now, I guess I will have to, because my cable's so short, I'm going to have to loosen the motors too. Normally I could have just like pulled the slack, but there's no slack. So we'll just pull it through there too. Okay, so that should be good enough. Let's see. So let's see if this is enough. So I think we're gonna need a little bit more because we can't quite clamp down on the rod. So let's pull it out a little bit more. And we got plenty on the back here. So that should be enough. So I'm gonna tighten this down. Okay, good. We still got slack on that motor, so we're good. All right, so let's throw this matte box on. See, now we can get enough to clamp, because we need to get it in there enough that it's gonna clamp down. And then we can just put it all the way to the lens. And then now we've got our matte box. And then to swing it away, you pull this, and then you pull it forward and then swing it away. So I'm gonna pull this up and then I'm gonna swing it, push it forward and then swing it. And then it'll lock in this place here. So it'll lock here, and then to just swing it back, you just pull this, swing it and push it back. So there's these little, if you see these little places for your fingers and thumb to push, swing it, and then push it again. So it's pretty simple. So this is, you can swing it open, swing the lens, but we're not going to be swinging using this. If we're not on the zoom, we're not going to use this. So this will just be for like a zoom build. Now, when you're doing a swing away matte box or like a studio matte box, you want to have what's called a donut. So we have some donuts laying around somewhere over here. So these are donuts. And they're just flexible, and they come in different sizes for your different lenses. So and then some of them you want them to stretch a little bit. So this one we'll just put over our lens like this, and then we'll close it, and then we'll put it like that. And we'll put it this way. There, we'll put it like that. So that what that does, it keeps any light from behind the camera leaking in and then shining onto any filters you have in here, and it'll wash out your image. So you don't want any of that. It'll also do like funky things with the image. It'll either wash it out, or it will also give like a reflection. You can see what's reflected behind the camera in the filter. And so you want to stop, obviously you want to stop that from happening, because it'll show up in like a circle or like little corners or edges. And so you just put the donut on there. Some are more flexible than others. This one's like really flexible. This one's like more stiff. And so this one actually doesn't fit. So we would want to ask for some bigger ones. But for now, this is pretty good. It's always good to have a couple of them just in case. If for some reason you have lost your donut or you don't have one, you can always use photo black tape. Your 2-inch photo black tape that you should have in your kit is you just take that and you just run it around and just block all that light from getting in, and you'll be good to go. The only thing is, if you have to swing this away for whatever reason, you're gonna have to like redo that tape a little bit. But it's better than not having anything. I feel like that's pretty much our zoom build. The only thing is, let's see if we need a bigger dovetail, because this is a pretty big build. Let's see, so we're really front heavy. Let's come back. Ugh. Oh gosh. It's not even moving. There we go. I had to lift up the front. All right, so now we're all the way back on the dovetail, and we're still gonna be front heavy, but we still have room on our Euro plate. So we'll loosen this. We'll come back, let's see. It's pretty good there. All right, so I don't know if you need a larger dovetail for this. It's good to have it. I would just add one just to have it just in case, but I would probably just leave the build like this. And always, you could even get more out of this too. You could move the quick release plate and move it forward here on the dovetail, so that way this dovetail sits further back on the Euro plate, and you can get even more movement back if you need. But I mean, this will work fine. All right, so our prep tech brought over our 6x matte box. So this should be great for this lens. So once we pop this on, we shouldn't have any issues. So this is a different style matte box. The one we had before that was 4x5 was a Panavision matte box. This is in an ARRI matte box, or ARRI matte box. So it still has multiple stages, but instead of the side trays, it has the top trays. And it still has a spot for a 138 Pola, but it also has these bellows. So I would still probably throw a donut on here just to be safe, but this allows us to just easily cover that gap. It looks pretty clear, and like there's no light coming through. So I would just throw a donut on just to be safe. But now let's take a look and see if we're going to, oh, we unplugged our zoom. Let's see, while it's calibrating, let's just see if this is gonna vignette now. So we're still getting a vignette. Let's see if we have, right now we have trays with, these are 6x trays, but they also have 4x5 inserts in them. So this allows you to use 4x5 filters in a 6x6 matte box, because sometimes you just need the bigger front of the matte box to cover the lens, not necessarily for the bigger filters. Let's see if we've pulled those out. Let's see, yeah, so it's still vignetting. All right, so what we're gonna have to do is see if they have a clip-on. And we're gonna we won't be able to have as many stages. So one thing that I've noticed with this lens while we've been prepping and messing with these matte boxes is that this lens vignettes on this camera at the widest. They're not, so this is the widest. So even in our 16:9, in the corners, we're getting crazy vignette. So basically, to use this lens to get it to cover, on the wide end, we would have to add, maybe not a doubler, but something like an expander. But then obviously we're not going to come to 24 mil, so it won't be 24 mil anymore. So another thing that could help solve it is if we go out of Airy Raw. So if we're not in Airy Raw, because we get a little bit of extra. But again, I don't think that's going to solve it. So basically, if the DP really needs to use this lens, you're going to have to tell them that it vignettes. I would say this lens is not really usable until you get about past the 60 mil, like 65 mil, and then you're good. So, you know, if the DP is planning on doing some kind of move from very wide to very tight, like all the way at the two ends of this lens, they need to know that this is going to vignette. And they might, because of that, they'll probably want to go to a different zoom. Or what they could do, which I doubt they'll want to do, is they could change resolutions. So right now we're in Airy Raw, open gate. So let's go out of Airy Raw. We'll go to quad 4. For our resolution, let's go 3.2K, which is the native resolution for the Alexa Mini, the original Mini. It does do a 4K UHD, but it's upscaling. It's not true 4HD. So now, if we look, our vignette isn't nearly as bad. It's still there in the 16:9, but it's not as bad. So let's see what we can go if we go to, we can be out by like, so this area here on the edge, this is a look around. So that's not what's going to be going to your image. It's what's inside these frame lines. So you could probably be about here at about a 50. I would just safely say like a 50 mil is where this lens is now usable. Before, when we were in Airy Raw open gate, we had to go all the way to like a 65. Now we're getting, you know, 15 more millimeters wider on this lens. And that's just kind of, some lenses they'll just vignette, so it doesn't quite work. So, you know, that's when the DP is going to want to make the decision of, is it okay if this lens is never on the wide end, you know, wider than a 50, or do they need to switch to a different zoom? And that's something you need to let them know right away, because then they're going to want to figure that out. So now we're still figuring out our matte box situation for this. I got a clip-on. So this is a 2-stage clip-on. So we have 2 filter trays, and we have the correct backing, I believe. So let's put this on. Yeah, this is the right backing. Now this should be good. So now if we look here, yeah, yep, we're clear. Now this is the lens itself here in the corners, but on the sides here, we're now clear. Now because we are going to a clip-on matte box with just 2 stages, we will be limited with our filters to like an ND and like a diffusion filter. So make sure, that's another thing you want to talk to your DP about, is let them know that yes, when we can go to the zoom, we are going to have a little bit of filter limitation. Luckily, you know, the Mini has built-in ND, so you might be able to get away with not having to put any ND in, and you could have, you know, 2 slots for like a Locon and like a Hollywood Blackmagic. But it's all going to depend on what the DP is doing for that job. There's so many things that you have to look at and you have to be ready for. And you have to ask questions to the DP and figure out all the little things that are going on, like how many filters are you trying to ride all the time? You know, is it okay if this lens vignettes at a certain millimeter? Or, you know, even when we get into the primes, you know, we've already looked at all of our primes. The 18 mil does not vignette with a matte box or anything, but sometimes when you get into really wide lenses, you just can't put a matte box on it because it will vignette and it'll see the matte box. So you'll just have to be like, hey, on the 12 mil or the 14 mil, we can't have a matte box because we see the matte box. And so it's just stuff you need to let them know so they can be aware of it, so they're not surprised by it when you're on set shooting. When you're adding like a new matte box, you're switching out to a matte box, make sure you get the right accessories for it, because not all the accessories will go on every other matte box. So we've got our eyebrow for our 6x as well. All right, so we've got this zoom build figured out. Now we're gonna tape out the lens and then program it into the Preston. So we'll do 15, 6, and 3 feet. So let's get started. Because like I said earlier when we were on the primes, and the reason why we're measuring everything and double checking, even though we set that for 15 feet with the prime lenses, I have moved the camera back on this plate from where it was compared to the primes. So earlier on the primes, we were closer. So when I get my reading, I'm getting a little bit longer on the chart. So we need to make sure that it's okay, we can leave it here, it's balanced, but on the chart, that's why we're double checking our measurements. So now we're just gonna have to adjust that chart by like an inch or two. Now we're 15 feet exactly. So now we can go on and check this out on the monitor. And remember, we're wide open again. This lens is only a 2.8, but you want to take it past that. You want to go as wide open as it'll go. Sometimes the lenses will stop right at the 2.8 or the 2, whatever the fastest T-stop is. Some of them will go a little bit further past. So just go all the way, just roll that iris until it won't go anymore. Oh, interesting. So I'm getting 13 feet here. And we're on the zoom, we're at about like in between a 45 and a 50. So what we're going to do is just, let's zoom all the way in. See there? So now we can get our critical focus a lot better, because now we're zoomed all the way in, and our depth of field is going to be really shallow now, because we're at a 275 mil. It's like paper thin. If you look, I mean, it's just in and out. So it just pops right in once we get it. So it's so sensitive. Because I don't have this programmed yet, it's very sensitive on the Preston. Once we get it programmed, this won't be quite as sensitive. Okay, so I feel like that's pretty good. And then if we look here, we're dead on. We're 15 feet, and we're zoomed all the way in. So that depth of field is very shallow. So this thing is tack sharp. So we're good here. All right, so now let's bring in the chart to 6 feet. Now this might be as close as we're gonna get with this lens, because if we look here, we could get 4 feet. The close focus on this lens is 4 feet. So we could bring it in 2 more feet just to get another measurement. That's it right there. And we're like 6 feet, pretty bang on. Let's see if we take it to 6 feet exactly. Here, let's see what it looks like. Yeah, that's good, that's sharp. All right, so now, for the heck of it, let's just bring it in that 2 extra feet, just to be safe. Now this image is a little dark because this is a slower lens, so we're not getting quite as much light. So this is a good time where you can like turn on your chart light if they have one. A lot of rental houses will have some kind of light on their charts for this very reason. So there now, see, like it's super sharp. We can see this way more clear. You can see the little texture on the chart. Okay, so I'm having a little trouble finding exactly the focus because this lens is not programmed, and I'm using it, the Preston has the A-ring set turned on, right? So it says the A-ring right here, and that A-ring has a close focus of, what was it, 9 inches or something like that. So once we get to the far end, you barely have to move the knob. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to our menu, and we're gonna turn off F-map. And then now that takes the mapping off of that pre-marked lens. So now I'm gonna have a lot more travel on the close end of this lens. So now I'm not doing like little itty bitty, like tiny micro movements. So now I can do like a good, still doing small movements, but it's a lot more easy. So I've got the lens set to 4 feet exactly, but it's just a little bit soft. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna double check my chart distance. This time I'm gonna measure from the camera from the focal plane, so we can get, even more accurate measurement. Doing it from the chart the way I had this set up is pretty accurate. So we're gonna find out how accurate. 4 feet, 5/8 inches. So it might be, and that might be enough because we're so close. That could be enough. Yeah, 4 5/8. So if we bring it in, just a hair, 1/16. So let's see. So even just bringing it in, if we look here, that little bit, fractions of an inch, it's making it sharp. So this thing looks like it's going to be pretty accurate because on my readings, you know, I was at 4 feet and 5/8. So that 5/8 of an inch threw the focus off that much, if you remember from before. It was completely, basically unusable, out of focus, and now we're sharp. So this is why we have to be as accurate as possible. Just that little itty bitty bit will change the focus because we're such a long lens, we're wide open, and we're very close to the camera. So, you know, this is why you want to make sure you tape out your lenses and that you're as accurate as possible with measuring to the chart, because you could end up sending lenses back that don't need to be sent back, or you could be measuring wrong distances, incorrect distances, and your lens may need service, but you think it's fine. So always double or even triple check. So, you know, for a moment I thought, oh, maybe we do need to send this back for service. But now that we've gotten like the most accurate measurement, this lens is pretty dead on. So this lens is good to go. We don't need to send it back or swap it out. All right, another thing we need to check on our zoom is that we are maintaining our focus throughout the zoom of the lens. All right, so now I'm going to zoom all the way in on this chart. I'm going to make it sharp. I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to kind of do it kind of slow so that I can make sure that it's keeping focus the entire travel of the zoom. And I might stop. So I'm going to stop here and just take a look at it. And it looks pretty good. So we'll just continue. And of course, as we get wider, that depth of field is going to get a lot bigger. So things are going to be sharper. So one thing, if they are shooting on a zoom and you're pulling focus, they're very deceiving because, you know, you could be wide. Like I said, that depth of field is very big now. We're at 24 mil, so it's very deep depth of field. But if they're zooming in during a shot, as they come in, that depth of field is shrinking drastically. And if you're not on the right distance on your ring or on your Preston, if you haven't measured it out, then as they zoom in, it's going to get soft. The image is going to get soft. So let's see, if I just pull this out, and I'm just going to do this by eye on the monitor, right? I'm going to do it by eye and just be like, oh, that's pretty soft, or I mean pretty sharp. So let's say like, that looks sharp. It's definitely sharp. So now let's see what happens if we zoom in. See, it's all soft. So we have to make sure that when we're pulling focus on set, that you're getting your measurements, especially if you're going to be doing any kind of zoom in a shot. You want to get that accurate measurement to the subjects so that when they do zoom in, our motor just jumped. So when you're pulling focus, you want to make sure you get those measurements. One thing that you can do is you can ask the operator before the take to zoom in to their focal length that they're going to be at the end of the zoom, and then grab the focus mark if you're unable to measure it or whatever, and then mark it on your handset. And then that way, you know when you're on the wide end, you know, not to set your focus in the wrong spot. You'll know exactly where to set it. So when they do that zoom, you'll be sharp on the move. And you won't have to like find it. You won't have to be like, oh God, and then mess up the shot. We need to program this lens. So now we're just going to program it. Move this out of the way. And we're going to do like last time. We're going to program the focus, and then we're going to program the iris. So we will just for safety, we'll calibrate everything. And then we're going to go into our Preston, go to our lens, all lenses. And now this is a Panavision lens. So I'm going to go down to the Panavision. I'm going to go, so this is a Primo Zoom. So we're going to go to Primo Zoom. Now there's none programmed in here. So we're going to do that because, you know, we're not fishing around and putting it in the wrong category. Most of the major focus units, hand units and systems we'll have lens manufacturer categories so that when you're programming lenses, you're like, oh, we're on the Cooks. Oh, now we're on the Primo Zoom. So then you can just go to that category and find it. It also helps differentiate all the different lens data in the handset. So you don't get confused by just doing like the millimeter of the lens, because you could have tons of different lenses on a job. All right, so, let's Primo Zoom. We're gonna do new lens. And so now it's a zoom, so it's giving us the range of the zoom, and it's a 24 to a 275. Yes, it's a 275. So we come over here, go 275. Hit next. And again, I'm not going to put the serial number. This is the only one we have on this job, so I'm just going to skip over that. So now we'll select it, and now we have to program it. So now we're going to set it to infinity. And again, I'm crouching down, making sure I get that as accurate as possible. It's all about accuracy. All right, so now let's get our close distance. It's 4 feet, so we're gonna have to find 4 feet. We'll have to scroll to find it. And then now we can start working our way back up. So we'll go 4, 6. We'll do 5 feet. Make sure we get it dead on. 6 feet. 7, 9, 12. We'll do 20. 20. 40, and then our last one. When those arrows pop up, that means you're on the last one. So I just always go to the furthest before infinity. And then now our focus is programmed. So now it's very sensitive right now because we don't have a ring programmed in. So you definitely want to find the ring. So we'll go to our case and find the ring that has our closest to that close focus. So I think here, so there's a 3 foot. This is the D ring. So we'll add the D ring, and then we'll come in here and go to menu, ring, and now we'll choose the D ring. So now it's not so sensitive. So now I have more travel to move the lens, and I'm not doing like these fine little micro movements to adjust the focus. All right. So there, now we got the focus. So now let's do the iris. So we'll go back, find our lens. We'll edit the lens. We'll calibrate iris. So now this lens is a 2.8. Oh, why isn't it moving? Oh, because we have it turned off. So we gotta go back. So we go to mode, setup. Now we have to turn back our iris, so the iris will be the slider. Now we can go back into our lens. We'll go all lens, Panavision Primo Zoom, edit lens, calibrate iris. Okay, so now it's working. So now we'll go to select our most wide open stop, which is a T28. We'll hit next, and then now we'll just go wide open. We'll go to a 22. And then now that's calibrated. So again, now you're gonna have to make that iris ring for your single channel. So you gotta make sure, like again, we gotta make sure we have enough blank rings so that we can give that single channel to the DIT or the DP so they can do iris on the fly. But we have it programmed on this as well so that if for any instance we need to take over on the iris, we can do that. So with the Preston, now that we have our prime lenses programmed and we now have our zoom lens programmed, what we can do now is with the Preston is instead of having to go through all those menus like we did with the lenses and all lenses and finding the manufacturer and then going into it, because we had Cook and Panavision lenses, that takes up time. So what we can do is, if we go back to the main lens area, we can see there's all lenses and then there's my list. So if we go to my list A, let's just remove all these. These are from someone else on another job. So let's remove all those. So now we have a custom favorites list, and we can go in there, and then we choose it, and then we can add a lens. And then just like we were doing our lenses before, we find them. So we've got the Panavision Primo Zoom, and then there's our 24 to 275, and we'll select that. And then now we're back at the list. So now let's add another one. So now we'll go to our Cooks, our S4s, and let's add our 75 mil. You know, obviously you would add every single one on the job. And then that way, whenever you swing a lens, you just go to menu, you go to lens, and you go to my list, and then you have your lenses that you're using for that job. So you're not looking around in all of the different pages and taking the time to scroll through all the lenses, because sometimes those lists will have like a bunch of lenses already programmed in there, and you're trying to find yours. So you don't want to do that. So just put them in the list, and then you'll just quickly, you can find that lens and calibrate. All right, so now let's get in, there's another thing we need to cover with the Zoom and the Preston is, you know, right now we're using the Microforce, because like, let's say this is our dolly sticks mode, but let's say this was gonna go on a crane or on a camera car. We need to remotely control that zoom, because we're not gonna be with the camera. So what we're gonna do is the Preston, like I said, it's a fizz for focus, iris, zoom, does zoom as well. So we're gonna hook that up to the Preston, and I'll show you how that works. So now we've got all the pieces we need. One thing we're gonna have to do is first we need to pop this handle off. This is for if you're just doing focus and iris, and it's just like an ergonomic handle. So we're just gonna have to remove this, and then so there's a little latch, just push that, pops off, slides out, and then we're going to come over, put this on. So this will go on here. So now we've got a spot for our Microforce. So we'll just line this up. Trying to get this so you can see in the GoPro, but it's hard to do without resting it against my body. Let's see if we can do this. There we go. All right, so we've got this in. So now we can do zoom, iris, and focus. But now we just need to plug in. So on the back here, there's the Limo cable will go to the zoom, and then this one will just go into the Microforce there. So, but another thing, before this will work, obviously it's not gonna work right now because it's hooked up to our Microforce. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna pull the cable from our zoom motor, and we can just lose, you know, in theory this is going on a crane, so we wouldn't have we wouldn't have this, but let's just pop that off, and now we're gonna need one more cable. We're gonna need another motor cable for the Preston for this zoom. So we have two more cables. These might not be long enough. So again, this is another reason why we're checking everything is, remember this one was already too short or barely long enough. So I don't think this one might not reach. Maybe if we go underneath, see if we can get it to reach if we go underneath. Because we're gonna be coming down over here onto the Z port. It's a little tight. Yeah, I don't think we're gonna make that work. Let's come in a little bit closer to the body, because right now we're losing distance here. So let's come here. We don't need a lot. Yeah, so that's not gonna work. This is another reason why I like to have 90s on both sides, because if it was a 90, it would fit. It has to come, we have to have more slack on this cable because we don't have the 90. I wonder if we do the 90, I think we're just gonna run into the same problem. So let's just see if we do 90 here. Oh yeah, I think we're just gonna run into the same problem because the cable's going this way. That's the nice thing about these cables, they're reversible. But I think we're gonna have the same issue. Yeah, it looks like we are. Yeah. And we can't go on this side really. We could go up top with the zoom, but I don't want to do that. We have our build pretty much good to go. We just need a couple more longer motor cables. And it's good to have some backup of these anyway, because we're using almost all of our cables. We basically have one backup and it's a short one, or it would be two short ones. And so we need to make sure we have backups for our longer ones and for our shorter ones. So we're gonna add those to the whiteboard so we can get that. All right, so we've got our longer motor cables now. So now I got 2 3-foot motor cables for the Preston. So now this should give us plenty of, of length to go to our MDR. Let's move this around. Here, let's move this so it's not in the way. All right. There we go. Plenty of length. I'll come up this way, go behind these cables, and then put this. Maybe I'll do another loop. And do like that. So now we have our zoom a part of our hand unit. It's because it's going into the MDR now. Before we were going to the Microforce, remember? So now we're going into the MDR. So let's grab our handset that now has our Microforce on it. And so we have our iris control, we have our focus control, and now we have our zoom control. Let's see if it's going in the right direction. So it's not going the right direction because I'm pushing forward and it's going wide, and then pulling back and it's going tight. So again, we'll just come here on the MDR and change the direction of the zoom. And now we have it in the right direction. One quick thing here that I forgot to mention is if you're doing your Microforce on your Preston, like you're on the crane or in a car, and you're not going to be doing the zooming as the first AC, what you can do is you can order a really long one of these cables, like 15 feet or more, and then that way you can disconnect this, and then now with that cable plugged in, you can just run that cable and hand it off to the operator. So if you're in the car, you know, because when you're doing car stuff, you're not always sitting next to each other. There's different orientations depending on which car you're using and which company it is. And so you might be in the trunk, you might be in the front, and most of the times the operator's in the middle somewhere. So you would have to run this to them. It's from your handset. So you want to make sure you get a couple of those cables as obviously backups. So you can just hand this off to the operator, and that way they can zoom however they need to on the fly. Without having to be like, zoom in, zoom out, zoom in a little bit more, you know, it's just, they can do exactly what they want right away. Same thing, you know, if it's on a crane, if the crane can't do the zoom through their controller, you would just do the same thing. You would just kind of set your monitor up close to wherever the operator is with the crane, and then just hand them the Microforce so they can do the zoom on the crane. Now you're wondering, you know, how are we going to know what millimeter on the lens we're at? What focal length we're at. So obviously if it's in a crane or in a camera car on an arm, we're not going to see what focal length we're at. So that's what this part of the Preston is for. This little light that's going up and down, that is our zoom. So we can come in here, oops, and we can write, so let's find out. So this is our tightest. So this is 275, so we'll kind of come in, make sure we get it as close as we can, 275. All right, we're gonna have to write really tiny. And then, oh, wrong one. And then let's go to the bottom, find our 24. And then ideally you wanna write all the focal lengths. If they're not gonna fit on here, then you can just do like the major ones. You know, do the widest, then do like 35, and then you could do, I would do like 40, 85. So now we're kind of running out of room as we're getting up because the travel is getting less and less. So you might have to choose a couple different focal lengths that make sense just to ballpark it. Now we have it all marked up and we can see where we're at. Now for when we're on the ground and the camera's up in the air or we're in the car, we can see what focal length we're at. Now, that doesn't always mean you're going to go find an exact focal length. It just gives them reference to know where they're at. Or maybe they do. Maybe they're like, all right, let's just go to like a 150, and then you can just look here and go up to a 150. And then if we look on the lens, we're pretty close to a 150. So you definitely want to do this. A lot of times they're just going to be floating around and finding it, but you always want to have this because you want some kind of reference of where you're at.